everyone. So I'm Mike Biarnes. I'm actually a double Hoya, so I have a master's in biotech as well from 2014. So I graduated with a biology degree out of undergrad and went into a very traditional lab job doing basic research. And with that, did my biotech degree part-time. And I always knew I wanted to be at the intersection of business and science. So I leveraged working in the breast cancer laboratory that I was in to go do R&D work for a biotech company. But like I said, I wanted to move closer to business. So that's where I made that jump. And I became a project manager there, working with customers end to end in services. So developing tests, diagnostic tests for customers, which is really awesome. And from there, I ended up working, I moved on to a nonprofit actually. So lots of different sectors throughout my career, but nonprofit, really great experience, very mission driven. This was managing strategic partnerships between large pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, the NIH, and the FDA. So got to work with all sorts of individuals within R&D, but also on the commercial teams, which was fantastic. And all of that was in neuroscience. And then basically, as I started reflecting on where I wanted to go next, I wanted that business emphasis, decided an MBA would be helpful no matter which trajectory I decided to go. So pushed pause on the career, did a full-time MBA, just graduated this May. And I leveraged that to join Janssen. So that's the Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical arm. And so I've joined them through a leadership development program, which I'm happy to talk more about. They're available to not just grad degrees, so there are MBA specific ones. There are some for PhDs, but there are also some for undergraduates as well. So happy to dive into that. But effectively, it's a rotational program. I get to touch many different parts of the commercial side of the pharmaceutical business. So I started about a month and a half ago now. I'm in new products and business development. Get to work very closely with R&D, our global teams across every country you can think of, but also with our U.S. counterparts. So very exciting. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's me at the 30,000-foot view.
Great. I believe I'm next. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Sunny. I was an NHS grad with a healthcare management policy degree back in 2010. And always a pleasure to speak to current students. Right after graduating, I went into consulting. I worked for PwC and focused mostly on the provider side, so operations and also patient kind of satisfaction strategy work was done with them. It was very interesting. I wanted to learn more about hospitals. I mean, when we say healthcare, it's pretty wide spectrum of players, right? But really the providers was where my heart was at. So I chose a route where I can kind of get to essentially work with as many providers as possible to pick out the best practices, as well as see some common mistakes made across the provider system, and with a mission to hopefully come up with a solution to tackle those challenges. So it was a great experience, work there. And then I went back to school to Northwestern, Kellogg School of Management for my MBA. And then post that, I actually went back into consulting, but this time with Boston Consulting Group, and did a bit more pure strategy work, but also focused quite a bit in the healthcare industry, given my past experience. But this time I did focus a bit more. I wanted to broaden my experience outside of providers, so focused on pharma and medtech customers, including Janssen, actually, Mike, a great company. And then I did a few more kind of M&A work that had to do with like health techs and health startups. And that's where kind of my interest in startups started peaking. I did go work for the customer that I was working for. So Becton Dickinson is one of the leading med tech players in the industry. So I went there to go work for the customer that I was serving in a consulting capacity. And my team was called Strategic Innovations, but essentially my boss's job was to be the chief of staff to the CEO. So we got a lot of special projects that would move the business forward in a lot of different capacities. But a lot of my work also focused quite a bit on sales strategy and how do we really interface strategically with academic medical centers, and how do we actively solve the problems that these academic medical centers have with the portfolio of products that we have and services. So it kind of tied in nicely with the consulting experience with providers that I started my career in. I am currently a bit more in the startup world. I am at Google now, and my work is around kind of building up strategy to acquire and support startups who are using Google services. So a little bit outside the healthcare zone, but that was kind of a career shift that I did with a specific goal in mind. So I can share that later. But always healthcare is at the core of my mission, and hopefully the experiences that I'm getting right now as well allow me to be even more effective in healthcare side when I return back to healthcare. So happy to answer questions on any of the experiences that I've had.
Great, and I can go next. My name's Claire. Can you guys hear me okay? So I graduated from the college in 2018. And since then, I've been working at a company called Crossix Solutions. Crossix is an analytics company that works in the healthcare space. We like to phrase ourselves as we're a technology company. We're not a data company. We're not actively selling or licensing any of our data. We're really an analytics arm working with the top 35 pharma companies and a bunch of other SMB accounts, so small, medium business accounts, really helping both the agencies and the pharma companies optimize their marketing strategies and campaigns. I actually had a pretty different trajectory, I would say, in terms of getting into the healthcare, the pharma, and the analytics space. I was an American Studies major in undergrad with an English minor, and I really wanted to work as a journalist, as a reporter, work for People Magazine, work for E-News, something in that realm. I was really interested in writing, reporting, that kind of space. Summer before my senior year, I interned at an agency. I actually interned at J3, which is a media agency that actually works closely with Janssen. That was the pharma company we represented. So essentially I worked there. Crossix came to campus the fall of my senior year. Kind of learned a lot about it, didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And here we are 3.5 years later. So I started as an associate and then became a lead associate, and now I'm a supervisor. Essentially what we do is really partner with these media agencies who are employed by the big pharma companies and essentially tell them, you're spending $40 million on advertising. Here's where we think your dollar should go. So if you guys are ever watching TV and you're watching The Bachelor at night and you see all of these pharma advertisements that are a minute long and they're telling you all of the side effects and you're like, okay, what is the point of this advertisement? Who's running this? Our job is essentially taking that data through our technology. So everything we do is HIPAA compliant. And it's really saying you spent $40 million on TV, you spent $20 million on DTC media. We're able to leverage that data and through our technology, match it back and say, here's the ROI you got. So essentially there's two arms within my company. There's analysts who are responsible for day-to-day coding. And then there's my role, which I would say is more of a product manager. So I'm working with the agency and a client on an everyday basis and really helping them answer questions, interpret the data. A lot of my day-to-day is looking at really big Excel files or looking at data visualization and Tableau and Spotfire files and saying, how do I take this data and translate it in 3 sentences to a client who has no idea what this is? It's really taking all of this and telling a story and saying, here's what we did, here's what I think we should do. It's also really working with them to understand their business questions and see how we can model our reporting to help suit their needs as well. Crossix, where I work, was bought by a company called Veeva in November of 2019. So I still technically work for Crossix. It's just now a part of this bigger company. Veeva they consider themselves a life sciences company as well. Their main competitor is IQVIA. So Veeva, I would say, is our big parent company. And then we operate as an independent business unit. So Crossix itself, when I started, it was about 100 people. Now we're up to about 350 people. So Crossix is rapidly growing. And then Veeva is a company of about 10,000 people. So it's also been really interesting to start at the startup and see how quickly we've been able to grow, learn new people, take on new roles, while also being part of this much bigger company. So that's a lot of my day-to-day. If anyone after this wants to talk about how to go from something you studied in college to something totally different, or either within the marketing space or the technology space, I'm happy to answer those questions as well.
I'll go next probably. So, hi everybody, my name is Naitry. I currently work as a regulatory specialist at Boston Scientific. So my journey has been very interesting because when I decided to do my master's, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to work in a lab. I still wanted to utilize my scientific background, and that's when I came across uh, the FDA course in my master's. So I did master's of biotechnology, and I graduated in 2016. And that's how I figured I knew that I came about to know about a field called regulatory affairs. So I know that you guys must have all heard about the FDA, especially with COVID-19. You know, FDA has approved this vaccine for this population. So who tells FDA? Who gives FDA this data? Right? Scientists are too busy creating all of the doing all the R&D. I'm the kind of the middleman, so I take all the data, whether it's quality, R&D, manufacturing, packaging, all of that, put it down in a packet to then present it to the FDA, right? And then FDA will review that data, come back to me saying, hey, I need more information as to why this population has these problems or the side effects, or give why it's not safe or what are the other risks, right? So my job is to make sure I evaluate the device for its safety and effectiveness and then present it to the FDA. And it's a very cross-functional role. I just don't interact with just one particular segment. I interact with marketing because being in the healthcare industry, every material that goes out is kind of regulated. You can't, like Claire was talking about the side effects, right? What side effects have to go on there? They can't just put anything and everything out there. Or, if your product is going to come in pipeline and then after it's going to get launched, what kind of data do you need to make sure that once it's on the market, it's still doing what it's supposed to do? So there are a lot of aspects to regulatory affairs itself. It's, regulatory, you can work in cosmetics, you can work in pharmaceutical, you can work in medical devices, tobacco. FDA has a lot of industries that it regulates, and you can probably pick any one of them. And I work in medical devices. I work across various Fortune 500 organizations that do orthopedics, cardio, endoscopy, urology devices. Currently, I'm in the urology device department, and my day-to-day looks like meeting with all these cross-functional teams, getting all the information, putting and making sure we are meeting the requirements. uh, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm happy to answer more questions if anybody has.
This is great. Thank you, everybody. I really wanted to find varied careers, and I think I definitely did. And Janssen, they have a lot going on. It sounds like they're really connected to all of you in some way. Okay, well, so some of you touched on this, but would love to hear more of your day-to-day. And, we know days change, of course, but, what does your work really entail? And even some of you, Naitry, you were just mentioning some of the things, but what does that really mean? So the more you can kind of dive in a bit, the better. So Mike, let's have you start. We'll go in the same order, but love to hear more about your day-to-day. Thank you.
Sure. So my role is heavily involved in the launch of new products, as well as when we go ahead and acquire or license a new pharmaceutical product, whether it's a biologic or a chemical. My group comes in, and what we're looking at is what are the opportunities like within the US and how does it fit within our pipeline? So it's heavy strategic. It's very, very cross-functional. I think everyone on this call will say the same about their role, but I'm working with marketing, regulatory affairs, a plethora of consulting and consultants and agencies that we've already heard about, as well as our global colleagues to see, okay, well, we have these clinical trials coming out in the US. How does that marketing vision align across the globe? Because what you don't want is to have the same product and have people across the globe think of it very differently, right? And so you want holistic brand. You want to make sure that the value is there for the patients, that we understand exactly how we design clinical trials will align with what the patient needs is. Naitry already talked about this, but if you don't, I do get involved with clinical trial design, because if you don't set up your clinical trial the right way, the FDA won't let you say certain things about your drug and won't let certain patients get your drug. And it's oftentimes poor clinical trial design, which makes it very difficult for an insurance company then come and say, okay, I'm going to approve this. I'm going to cover this for my patients. So it's very end-to-end, this role. It's very strategic. I'm working upstream with, like I said, the R&D folks, everyone from across the globe to create this high level of strategy. I'm also looping in the boots on the ground, the marketers who are then working with agencies to create those advertisements, make sure that we have access, that it's on, all of your insurance, it covers it, to make sure that, when you go to a pharmacy, it's stocked well, literally every step of the way in the life cycle of the drug. I get involved. So it really does depend on the day on what I'm focusing on, but hopefully that gives a little bit of a picture.
Great. Yeah, lots of similarities with what Mike does day to day. So when I was at Becton Dickinson, just tactically speaking, lots of meetings, right? Some of them are customer meetings. So we would go to the academic medical centers and I would go with somebody usually who has built their career in sales. So the skill sets that they bring to the table are quite different from mine, who like I grew up in strategic roles, right? And then we would do some interviews around what are the products and services that would really speak to this particular academic medical center, and are we doing a good job of providing them? Can we work together to potentially kind of iterate on the products that we have in the market so that we can help this AMC progress further in their goals? Was a lot of the conversations that I had with the customers. And then beyond that, when I was not traveling to go to the customers, lots of kind of brainstorming meetings with my team too, right? To kind of think through the high level strategy, as like Mike was saying, but then how does it really translate to tactical? Who are the stakeholders that we need to tackle? And then, so we probably had daily brainstorming sessions, like a whiteboarding session with a team on the specific problem that we're trying to tackle. And then from there, lots of cross-functional meetings that, as Mike said, talking with marketing, talking with the regional stakeholders, and talking with R&D to kind of think through, in a way, kind of pitch and sell the idea that the strategic innovation team has, and then iterating on that idea based on the expertise that these stakeholders have. So, and largely, I would say in between those meetings, I did a lot of building financial models, building a lot of just kind of forecasting models to see what is the impact of this to the business, and what kind of, if we target a certain type of a market, then what, what kind of volume can we expect, and so on, so that the business can be ready for that. So it was a very satisfying job for me because I really love the people aspect, and having those kind of customer conversations as well as the cross-functional conversations was a really fun piece for me. But at the same time, as my career grew, I used to hate modeling, honestly, when I first started consulting, but somehow the more I did it, I found joy in it, and just kind of like finding the logic and then building on that logic to produce something solid that spits out a number. So something that allowed me to leverage both qualitative and quantitative skill sets. So it was pretty much those skills were still used, I would say, on a daily basis.
And I would say, going off of a lot of the other trends, a lot of meetings, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of deep thinking, but I would say I'm spending a lot of my day, I think I said this earlier, but with numbers, with data sets, with code, and saying, what do these numbers mean and how do I tell this to a client? At Crossix, we kind of like to think of ourselves as this triangle where there's three equal pieces. So there's Crossix, there's the pharma company, and there's the media agency. So a lot of our day-to-day is trying to figure out, how do we fit within this triangle, and how do we have a working engagement and a good engagement model? We want to make sure we're working closely with the agency to make recommendations and optimizations, but we're also telling the pharma company, here's what we think you should do as well. A lot of the time when you're in a client services role, it can get dicey. So you can tell the agency something that they don't want to do, and they won't tell that to the pharma company. So it's positioning ourselves and saying, we're the leaders, we're the experts. Here's how you guys should take our advice, and here's what we're going to do in order to make sure these changes happen and these optimizations happen. I would say my job is very client services heavy. So I would say essentially I'm a project manager. I spend a lot of the day on the phone with the clients, a lot of presentations. What we'll do is we have monthly insights. We'll essentially take our data set, put it into digestible slides, and say, here are the changes you made within your media this month. You are running $1 million on display advertisements. So when you go on WebMD, for example, and you see an ad pop up, that's what the agency will spend money on. And we'll tell the agency, okay, you're spending a lot of money on WebMD, but we think that Healthline is a really qualified publisher. So maybe we shift some of those dollars into Healthline, and we have an internal platform where you're able to see those changes in real time. So what we're doing is on a monthly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, we're getting on the phone with the agency and the brand team, and we're saying, hey, here's what we're thinking. Here's what we think your team should do. They'll come back to us with a lot of questions, and we're really serving as the business expert and the leaders in the industry. We're saying, here's what we think, here's what we know you should do. So a lot of my day-to-day is working with clients, but it's also working cross-functionally, I think, as Mike and Sunny mentioned, with our analysts. So we're saying, okay, you guys are the ones running the code based on the business rules we're giving you. We have to take that code and interpret it. And we'll get an Excel and we'll say, okay, here's what the numbers say, but are these going to make sense to a client? If our number's saying this and last year it said this, do these numbers make sense? If our number's saying this and their Q4 model said this, do those numbers make sense? So a lot of it is thinking internally and saying, okay, are the numbers we're presenting making sense? Do they align with expectations? Is there any competitors in the market that we should know about? It's also working with some of the different arms within Veeva and Crossix. So we're working with our business development team, who's our sales team. And we're saying, hey, what about this pitch? Or what about this product? We're working with our marketing team and saying, okay, how should we shape this? Or how should we frame this? So I would say a lot of my day-to-day is meetings, PowerPoint, Excel, emails, but in a really interesting way. I used to laugh at internships or back in the day when people didn't work 9-to-5 jobs. And I was like, how do you fill a 9-to-5? Like, what do you do all day? And it blows my mind how fast the days get away with everything that's going on. I would say what I've really liked about my job so far is no day's the same. I've been here 3.5 years now, and there's still so much to learn. I'm never bored. There's always so much to do and learn and growth and change. So I would say that's the majority. It used to be a decent amount of travel. We used to go to client meetings on site in person to talk about reports and strategy. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but definitely looking forward to a time when we can do that in person again.
Yeah, I mean, so my day is very kind of different than all of these guys because my day typically involves, reviewing a lot of data and in explaining what the regulation is itself to people like Mike, Sunny, or Claire, saying, hey, the regulation says that you cannot include certain language in your marketing material, or you cannot, conduct such and such study, right? So it's not only just reviewing all the data, but it's also interpreting these regulations and explaining them to, the various team members and, making sure that we are complying to them, right? I think one of the key things that I love about my job is being able to work on products that have real impact on people's lives. Like I worked on an orthopedic implant, and then like 2 years later, my mom got the same orthopedic implant, and I got to say, oh my God, my work helped make that difference because I was part of the team that launched the product in the US, right? It's a brand new product. I'm making sure this product is safe and it's effective. It's doing what it's supposed to do. My mom's able to walk and run now because she was able to get that orthopedic implant, right? So that's the kind of work that I think inspires me and why I like being in this field. And it kind of motivates me to do the more boring jobs, more boring parts of my job, which is, reviewing all of the data, the risk management, doing a risk benefit analysis, making sure the hazards are identified, and making sure, telling the other teams that they have to comply with certain regulations. Those sometimes you have to be the bad guy in this role, but I think there are pros and cons, and I think that's what motivates and helps me do my job better. So those are that's a little bit about the good and the bad parts of my day, but I'm happy to expand and talk more.
Such a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I really, you hear a lot that people who choose to work in these industries really do it for the meaning and the purpose of it. I'm going to ask this question now because it just seems more fitting at this moment. We have a lot of undergrads on the call who, may be interested in looking at the pharma industry. What kinds of roles, if anybody could just answer, what would be some good entry points for somebody with a bachelor's only? I know 3 out of the 4 of you have higher level degrees, but if you could share, as you're working with different folks at your companies, what would be some good entry point roles?
I can go first. Regulatory affairs, you don't need to have a master's for regulatory affairs. All you need is the ability to, interpret, communicate, right, and have good writing ability. That's what is important. I have friends who don't even have a science background and have decided to move into regulatory affairs. So, Boston Scientific has great internship programs that they take on undergrads every summer. I am supervising an undergrad right now uh, who is a biomedical engineer, and she wants to go more into engineering, but she's just, interning in regulatory affairs, and now she seems to like it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll say there are opportunities for undergrads throughout the Janssen organization, Pharma, also at the biotech program I worked at. I think operations is a really good starting way to get your foot in the door with just simply an undergrad degree. But we have, like I said, LDP programs that are finance, operations. I think there's some in policy. We have some for medical device marketing. There are some on the consumer side as well. So like think of like all the baby products and like Neutrogena and stuff like that. Johnson & Johnson makes. There's marketing roles there. So yeah, marketing and operations I think are really good ways to get your foot in the door, and then you'll be able to move up to more strategic roles if that's what you want, or you can continue with more of those tactical roles.
And I'd also say from my experience, depending on your interest, I think I had a similar path where, granted, it was just an internship before senior year, but I started in the media side. So I think a lot of media agencies and those places will hire a lot of people in undergrad. You'll get your foot in the door. You'll learn about a bunch of different products and spaces. So I worked on a pharma account, for example, but other people work on Coca-Cola. They work on Tito's, things like that. I think that's a good place to meet a lot of people, get your foot in the door and learn. I think I was able to easily switch from media into this analytics role. I would also say for my company particularly, we hire a class every year. So every year, and now I think in the winter, we're actually hiring a bunch of undergrads. So you'll go through what we call an ADP program, an associate development program. And then from there, we've seen a lot of people with pretty high retention. The SVP of client services at our company actually started as an associate in 2012, I think. So there's a lot of people who start in Crossix from a bunch of different college backgrounds. But I would say either an agency landscape or one of these analytics startups or consulting companies are definitely a good place to look depending on interest.
I was going to ask Sunny, she started in consulting, if you have any other ideas and what you would say about starting consulting.
Yeah, no, consulting, I think provided me with a lot of different pros, right? Being able to kind of see how quite a few hospitals, or if you want to focus on pharma, like how many different pharma companies work, there's something that comes with going potentially inch deep, a mile wide, to be able to kind of pick out some of the systemic challenges that the industry has, as well as the opportunities. And I do think there are some pros and cons to the model of going deep into a special area within a company, and then kind of acquiring a broad set of knowledge across the industry. So it sort of depends on what you are potentially looking for, but I do think consulting definitely sets up somebody right to acquire also just kind of basic corporate business skills. I think obviously school is a great place to pick up many different skills, but there's some incremental skills that you need to pick up as well in order to thrive in the working world. And I think consulting is a great place to pick up those skills as well. So on top of healthcare related things, I think consulting can be a very valuable place for many of you who are interested in healthcare.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. I don't think sales was mentioned, right? And sales could also be another one. And I do want to emphasize what Mike was saying about leadership development programs. I know a lot of students also like the idea of a rotational where they can, figure out what they're interested in and what works for them. And a lot of biomedical pharma companies have those, which I think is really great. So something to look at. Okay, this is my last question, and then we'll open it up to all the students. Just what would you have done differently while at Georgetown and/or in your undergraduate degree or career, knowing what you know now? So Mike, we'll start with you.
Sure. For me, I think they always say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I thought as an undergrad, just getting all the grades and doing all the activities was enough. And I certainly did not network as much as I should have. So, a great starting place is to attend things like this and then listen to alumni, what their career journeys are, and then reach out to them and have conversations with them. I think there's a lot of knowledge. They're going to be able to put you in touch with folks within their network. LinkedIn is huge now, which it really wasn't when I was an undergrad, which might date me a bit. But just leveraging your network, your alumni association, people are willing to help. People are willing to have the conversation with you. And even the way you talk about yourself, you present yourself, how you talk about the things that you've done and your experiences it's almost a pitch, right? I definitely reach out to people and talk to as many folks as possible.
Yeah. Plus one to everything that Mike said. I think I should have taken more advantage to reach out to the alums, especially like in the roles that I am potentially considering. Because, when I was a senior, when I was a junior, I think I had a pretty good idea as to like types of activities I want to do in my job, but then it wasn't quite sure how it would like day-to-day translate. So like, I think those interviews would have been really helpful. I would also say, one thing that I did do, and I don't know if this is true, this is kind of the common pattern for at least class of 2010. Like we took our classes, but then also I feel like we all did like 10, 11 different extracurriculars. So like at least our class spread quite thin across many, many different extracurriculars. And I wish that I had kind of consolidated them and really like stepped back and thought about, okay, what exactly do I want to get out of each of these experiences and this club and particular leadership role I want to take? And then have something a bit more solid and concrete than to gain leadership skills, because that's kind of what I was going for. And I wish I was a bit more focused in the exact skill sets that I wanted to garner, and also tie that to the career that I wanted to pursue. So just it's tough because I remember undergrad years being just very busy with lots to do and lots of studying and to do for exams and homework and such. But I think it's worth the time to kind of step back once in a while and really ask, all the activities that are on your plate, are they serving a specific purpose that you're going towards?
I'd also add something a little different that I still have to tell myself now, especially for juniors or seniors as you're entering the job search, is it's not a competition. And don't feel pressure to take the first job offered to you. I think by the time you get to junior and senior year, when all of the recruiting is happening, I feel like it's easy to fall into the pressure and be like, I'm just going to apply because I want to get a job in September, October, and then I'll be good to go get the first one that offers it to me. I think there's a lot of people whose jobs are just offered later, or you'll find the job later, or things will happen later. It'll be a different trajectory for you. So I would say definitely don't feel pressure to compete with other people. Everyone's going to the consulting career fair. I just have to go to the consulting career fair, even though I don't know what a consultant is, and that's not what I want to do. I just hear everyone talking about it. So I would make sure that you guys are actively doing research and being patient and making sure you're looking at opportunities that have to do with your interest, not just looking at, well, everyone else is applying, so I want to apply, and really making sure you're taking the time to do your due diligence, network, see what's out there before just jumping on whatever opportunity comes your way.
Yeah, I mean, what everybody said was, almost what I had in mind. But just to add was, don't forget to reach out to also the smaller companies, because sometimes they're easier to get the foot into the door. Everybody wants to work for this big fancy organization, but those smaller companies, or you can really email them, and it's not just some automated system. It's probably a real human will see, and you'll probably get a response, especially if you're looking for internships or things of that sort of nature. So yeah, and network doesn't people might not reply, but some people will, and you never know what connection might lead you where.